Thank you so much, Marty, and thanks for the invitation to be here. I'm Dr. Jennifer Jacobs, and I am sorry that I can't be there in person today, but my colleagues, Jessica Stern and Vicki Conger, are there in the room. So hopefully some of you have had a chance to talk to them. And my background is actually nuclear engineering and physics. So not the common background that you come across in child welfare, but about 6 years ago, I shifted from work that I was doing mostly around countering nuclear terrorism into this child welfare space. It makes more sense than you'd think. And I'd like to tell you a little bit about why. Marty, if you can go to the next.
And Jen, just to interrupt, you went to the military, West Point?
Yes, I did. So I started my life at West Point, and then that spits you into the Army, of course. And so I spent some time in the Army, and then spent most of my career from that point forward in some type of national or homeland security work. Little stint at McKinsey and Company, and then back to doing nuclear counterterrorism.
Fantastic.
Yeah. So if you can pop it to the next slide there, Marty. What affected the change for me was that about 10 years ago, I was reading an article and realized that I, like many of us, maybe some of you, had a misunderstanding about kids who are in foster care. And that was that they're not effectively orphans, actually. They have people, and they have lots of people. But the trick is finding those people and asking them to help. And this can be very resource intensive, so most social workers can't do it. There's a specialized group of social workers of different stripes who can do this work, and that's what I was reading about. When I was reading that, I realized that this is actually a very similar process to something that's used in the Intel community. So that's why the DARPA interest, I suppose. So I teamed up with my co-founder there, Jessica Stern, and some others, and we started doing work around this and realized that we could actually avoid some of what you're seeing there on the screen. So youth who age out are not just starting at a disadvantage, they're starting way down in the hole. And if you look at the longitudinal studies to age 26, you can see that the outcomes are very poor. Two-thirds by age 26 have been homeless, incarcerated, or they're dead. And this is a great cost to society as well. Several studies have looked at this, and I'm using a low cost estimate that you'll see again in a couple slides of around $500,000 cost to society per youth.
And Jen, this is post foster care expense. Is that correct?
That's right. So this is when a youth, and the term age out, I should define as well. If you turn 18, or depending on the state, it can be up to 21. But you essentially leave foster care, become an adult, and you're on your own. Good luck with that. And you haven't been given that forever family that we promised you when you went into state care. You don't have that supportive connection. And that is very expensive, both in personal human terms, as well as strictly in taxpayer dollars. Medicaid used, incarceration, welfare, use of the emergency room for healthcare, more children born who aren't prepared, the parents aren't prepared for. So it can be very expensive. Our software is both disruptively innovative in that it does something very different in child welfare, but at the same time, very simple. And it does something that is already almost there. We're taking it that last mile. And so I want to show you, if you can go to the next slide, Marty, I'll show you just a glimpse of what that looks like. So this is just a quick look at one screen of our software, but it gives you an idea of what we're doing. I showed this to a former Intel colleague of mine, and he said, "Oh, you rebuilt our software," and he said it actually looks a little cooler. So I said, "Yeah, that was our goal." You can see there in the middle, the kind of dark gray box is our foster youth named Anna, and around her we've built out a simplified version of her family. It includes the traditional members of the family, mother, father, grandparents, but also some other folks who are relevant and not maybe on a traditional family tree. It's all draggy droppy. And on the right side, you can see that there are some connectivities to places that we might want to search. Some of those are are actually integrated into the software. So we can click with a couple clicks of a button, our users can actually import what the internet knows about publicly available data about anybody that's been added to that tree that we can locate information for. And that takes, one of our users told us, that takes him from about 7 days of work to 30 seconds. And that can be huge for a social worker who is trying. Most social workers that we've encountered are incredible people who are really trying and have been given way more work than is reasonable. So this has also been described as a game changer in the space by our users. It's been described as a one-stop shop for a whole bunch of things that they wish they could do, but normally they're not able to. It also allows a social worker to collaborate with his or her team so that they can support each other. They are often working effectively in silos because they're working on paper and pencil. This work that you see here on the screen, the example you see previously would have been done on Post-it notes or maybe Microsoft Excel, a very tedious way to do this kind of work. So, so this is integrating that, and it also allows supervisors to better see where their team is struggling, what cases are hitting walls, where they need extra help or extra counseling to their team members. So it can be an incredibly powerful tool for a team to work together as a team. So if you can go to the next slide, Marty, I just want to give you like
let me just give some feedback. So I have a background in technology. I got a master's in computer science, et cetera. I went through a long demo of it. I find the whole product is fantastically intuitive. So I could see where it would make it, something that you could use very, very quickly. So
thank you. Yeah, that's great. So a real life example, because you see this and you kind of see the technology, but what does it really mean? This is what it means. This is a real life case that one of our users shared with us. We do not work cases directly. We build and provide the software for free to our users and anyone else who's helping foster kids. But we stay in contact with our users. And this is one social worker named Sue. She was already familiar with our technology when she received the case of a young girl that we're calling Abby. And unfortunately, it's not so unusual that Abby had been in foster care for 7 years. She'd been in 36 different placements, and somehow no one had been able to keep her connected with family. Sue got her case, quickly used our software, just like what I showed you on the last slide, and it found contact information for 7 family members, including one which was her grandfather. You ask yourself, how could her grandfather not know where she was? Unfortunately, that's fairly common in foster care. When the state takes a child, they may essentially cut off contact from that child's actual relative. So you reach out to your niece or your nephew or your grandchild or your siblings' children, and you can't do that necessarily if they've gone into foster care. You actually lose the right to do that sometimes. And so grandparents and aunts and uncles can have no idea what happened to a child, but of course, no one's telling the child that. And so the child takes the message that they're not worth contacting. Nobody actually wants to be in contact with them, probably because they're so bad or they're so unwanted. And of course, that couldn't be further from the truth. They did nothing wrong. So what happened in this case was the grandfather was delighted to be contacted. They had been searching for Abby for 7 years. They couldn't get in contact with where she was. Grandfather called a family meeting like that within days. He had a family meeting organized with the social worker and Abby participating. And Abby in this meeting met an adult cousin she hadn't met before. They just happened to click in the meeting. And one thing led to another. And within a couple of weeks, Abby's moving in with the adult cousin. She'd been background cleared and all that through the social worker, through Sue. And what was really remarkable was not just the speed and the clarity of what happened there and that it should have happened years before, but at least it did happen once Sue got our software applied. But what was amazing, as Sue described it, was when she first met Abby on that first day, Abby was withdrawn and depressed, 15-year-old girl. When she got her moved into her cousin's house, she turned into this bubbly, happy personality that is obviously what was underlying that. So you can see the difference. And if you even think about kids that you know or yourself when you were a teenager, what it would be like and the difference in those two scenarios, you can see it totally makes sense why that would affect a person so much. So this is what we do. Sue did the work. Sue's an incredibly dedicated social worker. What we did was make it possible for Sue to do that, and make it possible for Sue to do that for lots of foster kids, not just one or two. So next slide, please. This is just to give you a sense of how the country is reacting to this. So the light blue are states where we have between 1 and about 500 users. We try to keep our users' information, the cases, the children that are served private. But I can tell you that users can serve between a couple and 10 to 20 children. So that light blue plus the dark blue represents thousands of children who are being served, and their connections, their families, their supporters. And when I say family, it can also mean neighbors, teachers, coaches, the bigger sense of a family. We have a teenager recently who's being adopted by a basketball coach from like 5 years prior. A broad sense of family. So this is thousands of kids in foster care who would have been disconnected, continuing to be disconnected, who are now being connected. The dark blue are states that have taken proactive steps forward of various types to say that what the software does and connect our kids is something that they want in their state. And then we're obviously working to build that in a variety of ways. And that's where we're looking for your help today. Marty, if you can go to the next slide. I just want to show you a sense of an ROI calculation here. And I know that these numbers can seem a little crazy, and that's not totally wrong. Let me walk you through this and then get to kind of why they are how they are. We have found in the 3 years since we launched our pilot, which concluded in 2020, that there are a number of areas of really low-hanging fruit in this space. So we believe, and I'll talk on the next slide a little more detail about what this investment would be about. But for just about $2.5 million a year, we can make enormous impact in this space. How much impact? I've put some numbers around that for you here, so you can see the number I mentioned previously, about $500,000 per young adult who's aged out of foster care without connection. It is costing society about $500,000. That's a low estimate to address that. So that's the amount we would recover. Every year, we age out 20,000 youth into that category, 20,000 every year. If we just estimate that we would reach 10% of those, not even all of them, just 10%, so 2,000 every year, by what I was showing you what Sue did for Abby, and that we're not necessarily even recovering that entire 500,000. For some of them, maybe only half of that. So if you work those numbers through, it comes out to what you see there, $7.5 billion over the 10 years. And if you do that division, you get a very large ROI. I recognize that's bordering absurd, but the reason that it's so large makes sense. One, because what we're doing can make a huge difference. Getting Abby connected to her grandfather changed her life. All Sue needed to do that was a phone number, because Sue's already in place. We don't have to pay for Sue's salary. We don't have to pay for Sue's office. We don't have to pay for Sue's supervisor and all her training. That already exists. All we have to do is close that final mile for Abby, and it changes her life. And that's why you get this incredible ROI. And also because the cost is so high. For lack of that connection, Abby's life would have gone in a completely different direction, very likely. So you can see that this can make an incredible impact. Of course, in addition to that is the human impact. These are real lives that are saved, that are changed, and that become productive citizens. So we feel like it's a huge impact, either way you look at it. And I know if there's questions, just Marty, just interrupt me. Otherwise, I'll just keep rolling. If you can go to the next slide.
And Jen, I just want to jump in here for 1 second. So I was thinking, I don't know if it was Jessica, maybe. Jessica, can you guys wave your hand? And so they're the Connect Our Kids people here. So they called me up on the phone and I said, so how much, because I had this conversation every day with somebody, how much money are you raising? And they said like $26 million. I said, well, that makes sense. I mean, you're helping foster kids, right? I said, so how much is that? Over, is that just for 1 year? I said, no, that's for 10 years. So I said, so you're raising $2.5 million per year, amortized over 400,000 kids. So that's around, let's just give it a round number of $10 a kid, right? So I'm like, wow, so $10 a kid, and you're giving away the software. It's going to a social worker who's going to get trained, and that's how you pay for the training. And that's all you need to get this happening. So the $500,000 cost they have is a social cost of post foster care, but the reality is that there's a substantial, bureaucracy built around foster care. There's a social worker, and there's somebody who supervises that social worker, and there's other types of people. And one thing that Jen and I have had discussions about, and other people from the group have said that one of the things these social workers, it's a real CYA occupation. They're really afraid of being sued. And so, one of the questions is, all of a sudden they have this very efficacious tool set that has been put together by Connect Our Kids. And it's really a matter of actually making real strides against this social issue. And there's actually even, more intriguing stories out there about, foster kids where there are people living, immediate family within 20 miles. So you can continue.
Yeah, for sure. There are so many stories like that, where it turns out there are dozens of family members living not far away. So it's just finding them. So here's just a little more detail on what that 26 million is about. Because as I mentioned earlier, we don't directly serve any cases, we support those who do. So our partner training and collaboration is crucial. We really want to support the innovative leaders out there. There is an aspect of risk aversion in the space, but we have found that there are those innovators out there, and they're willing to disrupt and to innovate to serve the kids that they're responsible for. And so we really want to empower them, train them, make sure that they're able to lead in this field as well. One of the things that we're doing in order to really empower our partners in the field is to spread the best practices that we are finding. This field is interesting in that it's very siloed, not just within teams, as I mentioned earlier, but also from one organization to the next. So something super innovative might be happening in San Francisco child welfare, but in across the country in Virginia here, we might not know anything about it because there isn't a lot of discussion or collaboration. As it turns out, Connect Our Kids, because you saw from that map, we are practically nationwide. We are starting to be the network between social workers in completely different spaces. And so one of the things that we've found is incredibly effective already is to share best practices. Then schools of social work are how we make this a sustainable change. When we can embed in the schools of social work both the software and the way of doing business, that we need to be effective and we need to use technology, we need to be innovative, and get them that final mile, then this will start to sustain itself. And so part of that 10-year investment is to work with the leading schools of social work and really embed this there. And then finally, the AI integration, which of course is super exciting. We have some really neat ideas and collaborations there. We're working with a company that does family recognition, relationship identification through photo analysis. So imagine being able to find the father of a child who is maybe unknown even. He may not even be aware that he has a child. That happens not infrequently, by running a software through Facebook pictures and being able to say, this is a child's father versus his uncle. And the software is reportedly that good. So we're really excited about that as one of the many things that we can move this field forward in the next 10 years. There's a lot of really hard pieces in this field, but this isn't it. The really hard stuff is, family problems that are hard to solve. There are so many things that can be done in this field to give social workers the ability to work those hard problems. And that's what we call low-hanging fruit. And that's where we want to pick that.
So, and just to add in, so this is actually a data platform, right? So for the first time, you can collect this data across the country. And then as you develop methodology, so for example, I think you have a report writing capability, or sometimes you work with different states and they say, create this report, create that report. But once you've done it, that methodology becomes automatic to everybody else who's using the system. And there may be some people who are not as sophisticated and say, oh, great, that's how you look at it. So this is where you have a value add, and you're talking about best practices. So that's just a concrete example.
Yeah, we're actually starting to build in best practices. That's one of the steps that we're taking next. So if we have something that works really well, like the report example you gave, or others, we'll build that in. Nothing is forced. Users always have the option to do how they want to, but that way it just comes to you. And you can see how over time that can be embedded into the culture and right into the schools of social work. Those young graduates come out already knowing how and what to do. And pretty soon they're the supervisors of tomorrow and implementing this, because of course we would do business this way. So if you can go to the next slide, I can just finish up because I know I'm between you and dinner. So what do we need to help more kids? We've already served about 10,000 kids, but unfortunately there are 400,000 kids in foster care at any given time in the US. And as I mentioned, 20,000 of those are losing the chance to be a child in a loving, supportive home for a permanent family every year. And so in addition to the funding, which of course, besides the actual funding, gives us the stability and the efficiency to really be able to be creative and innovative. We've been funded heavily by a couple states, and we're grateful for that. But of course, government funding is severely restricted and doesn't afford us that flexibility. So in addition to the funding, however, we would very much be grateful for your introductions and any assistance with getting to any level of government. Child welfare is operated at the state and local levels, but also the federal government has a very significant role to play. And any foundations or individuals who are interested in this mission, we would very much love introductions to those. Or if you yourself are someone who'd love to just learn more about this, talk more about this, we'd love to do that as well. So, and then if there's any questions, or we can go to the last slide just so you can get our contact information. Thank you.
It's award and funding partners. Got it. Is that right? Yep.
Yep. Sorry, was there a question?
No. One question. Yes, Mike? Yeah, I'm curious. What is the training process like for all the social workers I know are incredibly overworked and have Right. So what is the training like? How time consuming is it? Is it difficult? Is it intuitive? Can you discuss that?
Yeah, of course. So we specifically designed our software, but Marty, you can speak to this, to be super intuitive, super easy to use. I have found one of my young teenagers use it. She waived off any and all training and insisted that she could see exactly how to use it without any help from you. Thank you, Mom. But we've also found that social workers, especially in their 20s and 30s, use it with little to no training often. But we do offer training that goes with it. Most social workers and the others that we offer this to, an hour-long training is about all they need. If they struggle with it a bit and they're not comfortable, then we can do a little more. But for the vast majority, probably 0 to 60 minutes is sufficient. In addition, though, we have a YouTube library of course, on-demand videos that go through almost every question we've been asked. How do you draw a line? How do you move a box? How do you use the search tool? So we just make a super tight video, 2 to 3 minutes or so is most of our videos. So if you're working your cases at midnight, you can get an answer off of our video library, or you can, and we also have a live help where people send in their questions. But Marty, you said you had a feeling that it was intuitive?
Yeah, I mean, I looked at it. I talked to your chief technology officer. It's super intuitive, and if I was going to design it and go against data sources, it goes against the right data sources that you would be looking at to find family. So I thought it was very simple. It made a lot of sense, et cetera. Other question? Yeah. So some yeah, there bureaucracy. So some states are have adopted it, where there's thousands of kids being looked at, like on your map. But other states are moving more slowly. Are there differences in bureaucracy? What's it like?
Yeah, so there are many differences in bureaucracy. States can vary both in their administration. So some states, for example, Virginia, child welfare is actually administered at the county level. So the state can only recommend and request, they cannot require. In other states, the state can require. So there's a lot of variety around that. We've made our software such that there's nothing under the tent about it, so to speak. So the data that it finds is all publicly available. Our software doesn't do anything for a user that they are not legally allowed to do. Doesn't, give social security numbers or anything like that, which has allowed, largely because of that bureaucratic structure. So sometimes we have users who are, the first leading users in Vermont or something, and they can do that. We don't require any contract from them. We don't require, other than the user agreement, we don't require that they have special permissions. And then in other states, they have seen the value of it. Partially, that's also due to the people that we have had connections to. And so that's one of the things that we're asking you for today, is if you have connections in whatever state you have them in, we'd love, to people who are in government roles that they could influence this. Some states at the state level haven't had an opportunity to look at it. So they may have users. In one state, we had 200 users before the state actually was even really aware of it. So when we talked to that state, they said, well, we're not sure. And we said, well, you do already have 200 users in the state. And they said, oh, okay, that's good to know. So that helped them, encourage them that their people wanted this.
And on this last page, you already have a description of some of the foundations you're working with. Can you talk about your financial underpinnings? I mean, Ohio and Mississippi have already given you grants. And you talk about what the grant process is, how long it takes, any special, things they demand, et cetera, like the regulatory aspect to it and reporting.
Yeah, so Ohio and Mississippi have given us funding from the state level, and we are grateful for that funding. It has built the software that we have today. But of course, like good stewards of taxpayer money, they have to go through processes to make sure that they're doing things how they're supposed to. And that can take a long time, a year plus for each of those states. And it requires that, for example, if we're spending Mississippi money, I can't use that to train someone in San Francisco. That's just not appropriate use of Mississippi taxpayers' money. If I can make advancements in the software, that's good and everyone can use it, but it fundamentally limits us to whatever we agreed that, say, Mississippi wants to do. That's fantastic, and we're excited about doing that, but it doesn't allow us to go work that AI facial recognition issue, because that's not something that was, that was in their focus lane. So the flexible funding is crucial to us being able to really disrupt and innovate this space.
And it's really interesting because I had a conversation with somebody about 2 weeks ago, and they're from Utah, and they said, well, they think it would be really fast adoption in states like Utah and Nevada, et cetera, because they're very low bureaucracy states. But then I explained that California actually probably has more foster kids than any other state. Do you have any data on that, like California versus the rest of the United States in terms of foster kids?
In terms of numbers, for sure. Yeah, California, in fact, LA alone has almost 40,000 foster children. So LA has almost 10% of the nation's foster children. California as a state, I believe is about 60 to 70,000. Next closest state, I believe, is Texas, around 40 to 50,000, and then New York is after that. Utah and Nevada, I mean, the number of foster children is directly related to the population. Of course, there are different rates. It's not 100% consistent, but on in mass numbers, just because the populations of Utah and Nevada are so low, their absolute number of foster children is going to be much lower than the massive population you find in California produces.
Another question, yeah. How do you get traction in Oregon and Washington?
Please say it again.
The traction in Oregon and Washington. Can you talk about that?
Oh, Oregon and Washington states, yes. So how did we get the traction? So in Washington state, we had a champion there. There was we partnered with the Dave Thomas Foundation for Adoption. They do exactly this kind of work through a program called Wendy's Wonderful Kids. It's a fantastic program. And in Washington state, they have an entire team of Wendy's Wonderful Kids recruiters who saw the software. They came across it, I think, through the Dave Thomas Foundation. They took it, and because the way Washington works, they do that whole thing as a state. The Wendy's team took it to the state and championed it and said, we want to use this. They pushed through the hoops, and Washington actually did a formal IT review of the software. And they, on the IT review report out, they said it was the most beautiful piece of software they'd ever reviewed. Our CTO loved that. In Oregon, similarly, we, through a program that we work with the court-appointed special advocates, which is known as CASA, for any of you who might know that. There were some CASAs in Oregon who wanted to use it, and through that got to the attention of the state. They said, hold up, anything anybody uses, we have to review. We said, happy to do that with you. They also did a formal IT review and said, this is fantastic. Everybody should use it.
Again, I think it's really intriguing. The number that gets to me, it's about $10 a foster kid, really, for the kind of money that you're asking for, which is not a lot of money at all. I think it's pretty simple. The fact that the majority of these kids are minorities, a lot of ethnic African Americans and Indigenous Americans, also gives it a whole nother side of the story. So I think it's intriguing. I have some people that have already volunteered to help. I also think it's an extension of technology, right? So as many people may know already, that there are funds available from most of the urban cities to move homeless people back in with their families. So New York has a program for $5,000 they'll give a family to take a homeless person back into the home, and there's another one. I believe Los Angeles has a similar program for $3,000. So one of the problems is the same problem for social workers, which is finding the family. And so this technology can be extended not just among foster kids, but into other aspects, which in my perspective, if you're a real estate owner in like San Diego on the coast, or Orange, or Los Angeles, and there's a homeless a problem, this is a great extension of technology. And it's from a self-interest point of view, it makes a lot of sense. The other aspect I thought was really important was that we run into hedge fund managers, private equity managers, and family offices that have headline risk. And this is a great way of de-risking the headlines for you. To me, it's a real no-brainer. It is not a lot of money, but the enrichment from association with something like this is really fantastic. So there's all kinds of opportunities. And so I'm asking people who are interested to talk to me about joining the executive committee, which we're putting together, and we'll go out and force and try to spread the word about Connect Our Kids. And I think there's lots of great things that can be accomplished on a short time frame. And added bonus is, of course, you get to work with some really dynamic people from across the country. Another added bonus is that several of these people are family offices. We did this for Working Nation. We've added half a dozen family offices from this group to the Working Nation Executive Committee. And they already had a half a dozen that we were already connected to on that executive committee. So we expect to get some good people assisting with this to make it successful. And so just reach out to me if you have any questions. Jennifer?
Thank you so much, Marty. We really appreciate the time. And if anyone is interested in learning more about that homeless aspect of it, we are already working with an organization in Los Angeles, West Coast Care, and Jessica in particular can talk more about that if you grab her. And we are grateful for the time, Marty, and for the opportunity to tell about this. Happy to talk to anyone further. Thank you.
Yep. Thanks so much. Great job. Thanks. All righty. So a lot of us are going to head to dinner soon. I just want to remind people that we're going to be in Dallas, October 25th and 26th. November 28th and 29th, we're going to be in Miami for Art Basel. Yay. And Tim Draper will be speaking there. And Phil Darabov, who's an ex-partner at Goldman. He runs one of the largest CLO funds in the world. We're going to be back in New York City December 13th. And we'll be back here in San Francisco for JP Morgan Healthcare Week, January 11th and 12th. So thanks so much.